Hello all, welcome to the video on how to analyze the DILR section. Before we start, I would recommend you note down all the problems that you have with regards to analysis of the DILR section in a notebook. At the end of the video, see if your concerns have been addressed. If they have been, great, get to work. If they have not been addressed, you can ask your question in the comment section below and I shall try to respond in a timely fashion. Okay, getting to the agenda of this presentation slash video. See, for the QA section, you can talk of the analysis straight away, the attempt strategy straight away, because what is encapsulated within the QA section is very clear. DILR section, on the other hand, is slightly different, and therefore there is a section on what is the DILR section all about, the general problems that people face, and then we'll get to the attempt approach, what is meant by analysis, how to do the DILR section analysis, and the future task checklist. Okay, first part being DILR section, the untamable monster. If you interact with toppers or people who've done fairly well in CAT, you will get this consensus. DLR section is the toughest section, and empirically it bears out because the percentage score required to get 99 percentile in DLR is lower compared to the other two sections. But still, if it is untamable, simply draw a logical setup. If it is untamable for you, it is not like other people are able to ace this. At least not as many people that would make it a hopeless case for you. There are people who are able to do well. DLR section in itself is a combination of language reasoning skills and also numeric reasoning skills. Given that it combines two setups or two logical setups, it becomes difficult for people to comprehend it, and therein lies the problem. Let's look at in greater detail what happens. In simple terms, data analysis or interpretation is nothing but performing various calculations or operations upon the given data in order to arrive at meaningful conclusions. The conclusions can either be quantitative or qualitative in nature. In some cases, it may be sufficient to merely organize or reorganize the given data without the necessity of performing any actual calculations. So it is not always about calculation. It may be simply about organizing the data appropriately, especially in LR questions, say arrangement or distribution and the like. Now, traditionally, within the DILR domain, the topics that are there are tables and charts and games and tournaments, networks and pathways, arrangements, distribution, Venn diagrams, so on and so forth. There are uh, these many topics. A common refrain that you would hear from people who appear in the mock tests is whatever we studied in the class is not asked in the mocks, and thus either the intent or the content was bad. What I mean by intent or content was the teacher did not want to teach us tough things because uh, one, they did not want to make the effort, or two, they are themselves weak at it. The second, the materials that were provided to us initially in the class were faulty, and this is something that I want to address via this video. See, the problem with the DILR section is that yes, these are the basic things that you need to know, but the challenge comes when you come to the DILR section. If you're good at all these, you should do fairly well in the other management entrance exams DILR section, the SNAPs and the NMATs of the world. If you're good at the basic topics, you will do well in those sections. The problem in DILR section of CAT is, read it on this page. Traditionally, data interpretation questions used to test you on one specific topic, but in the recent years, CAT, especially since 2015, uh, it has started asking questions based on combination of topics or seemingly new things altogether. They started giving you questions that you have previously never thought of, unfamiliar setups. So it has become difficult for people to ace this section compared to what they were doing earlier. Also, because these are combination of topics. When you're studying one topic uniquely. You're looking at a question, you know this is from bar charts, this is from pie chart. You solve using things that you learned in the bar chart class. When you look at a question without a heading on top of it, then knowing which setup to use, what reasoning will be used, that becomes difficult for people. And I sympathize with you, but understand the problem of the teachers or the institute. I will be defending them. You cannot jump to the combination level straight away. You cannot jump to the combination level straight away. You cannot have, let me give a child a question based on maximization, minimization problem in set theory with certain restrictions until the time they know what union, intersection, and complement are. First thing you would need to teach them is the basics. Now, because people, children have to learn the basic things first, they become comfortable there. And here there is a little bit of fault of the institutions as well. They don't raise the rate of ascent in the DILR section teaching in the industry, not just a specific institute. In the industry, I don't believe is appropriate, because in class they tend to stop at the level at which, say, you would ace an exam like CMAT. They don't go beyond that. But when you start taking mocks, the questions are all of a sudden of an altogether different variety. The difficulty level rises, and thereby a lot of people get demotivated. A lot of people get, let's say, dispirited. So you can choose to do that. You can choose to be extremely, extremely dispirited. You can choose to give up on the DLR section or hope that you end up with a simple exam paper. But the other thing is, it is not just for you, it is for several other people. The same thing happens with several other people. Additionally, if you don't know something, what should be your next? Let's try and get better at it. You have the raw materials in place. How do you implement it makes you a good DILR solver or not? I'll go back to the chess analogy I like to draw. See, knowing these basic topics is like knowing how every piece in a chess board moves. So how does a queen move? How does a rook move? How does a pawn move? How does a bishop move? How does a knight move? When you cover these topics, you're learning that. Now about the different strategies, what is a Sicilian opening, what is a Victorian defense, and blah, whatever happens in chess, I'm not very well aware. But all of that is actual CAT level DILR solving. You cannot do CAT level DILR solving until the time you know the basics. So basics are extremely important. But then you could do better with regards to the rate of ascent. There has to be a portion in your batches. I don't know if it is true for you, but across all the institutions that I've seen in the industry, traditionally the DILR section constitutes the lowest number of classroom hours. You have long drawn lectures in quant, you have long drawn questions in VARC, but comparatively DILR has much fewer lectures, and you don't get to attempt tough questions in class. That is also based on the business requirement. In case you start solving tough questions in class, people will leave a bad feedback and might share with other fellow aspirants of the upcoming years that okay, this DILR was too difficult, blah blah. See, there is an argument to be made from both sides. Yes, children have valid concerns, but institutions are also bound by certain objectives, which I may not necessarily agree with, but there is an argument to be had. The thing that you should take away from this is, you have to be good with the basics, and then be ready to embrace the uncertainty of what is going to come in the DILR section. You cannot predict. You cannot have a set idea of, okay, this all comes, I will definitely do this. That is not the way to go. In order to do well in this section, you need to be ready to think and not just rely on familiarity with setups alone. Yes, familiarity with setups helps, and familiarity with setup builds with you practicing more and more questions from varied sources. But you cannot be relying on, okay, I know XYZ things, I will not learn anything more. DILR learning will never ever end. Me being as old as I am and as immersed in this industry as I am, I'm still learning new ways to attempt questions, new insights about questions to this day. Even in questions that I have previously solved in lesser time, I'm still finding new ways to solve it. I'm sure you will also keep on finding it. I've also provided the percentile versus the score for the past 3 CAT papers for the DILR section. I have sourced it from somewhere, so I cannot vouch for its accuracy, especially in the lower percentile ranges. But for the upper percentile ranges, I can be fairly confident. Yes, And remember, these are scaled scores. These are not absolute scores. These are scaled scores based on the scorecards of the candidates that I've seen. So insights that you can draw from this: solving 4 to 5 sets is enough for one to score around score. I'm so sorry for this mistake. To score around 99%, 4 to 5 sets is enough. Now see, what this should tell you is selection of what to do and what not to do is equally critical. Your decision about whether I should attempt a set or not attempt a set, that is important. But what people turn it around and mistakenly interpret it as, I don't have to study everything. I don't have to do well in everything. Yes, you don't have to do well in everything, but the ability to choose, the ability to decide what you will be good at and what you will not be good at comes from you knowing a lot of other things. If you're leaving out topics altogether, there are people that I've interacted with in the recent past who are saying games and tournaments seems too difficult. I'm going to not prepare it at all. Well, okay, don't prepare it at all, but then don't blame anyone else if there is a games and tournament question coming in CAT next year in your slot and you're unable to solve it, and then claim DILR section of stuff. You consciously made that decision. You have to study everything. If you've given your all, you will never come out of the exam hall disappointed. You may not necessarily score very well, but if you've given it your all, if you've studied as much as you can or put in the effort, then you'll be happy. If you've not put in the effort, then everything else is incidental. What this scoring pattern or percentile versus score split should tell you is selection is extremely important, and you have to be good at everything in order to make those correct selections of what to attempt and what not to attempt. Okay, this is the bit about the DILR section that I wanted to share about, because there is a certain degree of uncertainty, certain degree of unknown involved in this section, and you have to be ready to embrace it. You have to be willing to agree to the idea, yes, you will not be perfect at it. Apart from very few people, there is rarely anyone. To the best of my knowledge, I know of 2 people who scored 96 out of 96 and DLR last year, which was very common, say 5-6 years back, which was very common, but now it is not. Given that the playing field is level for everyone, it is of no concern. Okay, that was the bit about the DILR section, and that is going to inform what we do next in our attempt approach and how to do the analysis and everything. Getting to the attempt approach part, and again, this is very, very unique. This is something that I do for myself. This is something that I do for myself. It may work for you, it may not work for you. See how it pans out for you. First thing I do as soon as the section starts is I view the question paper in a single view mode. Single view mode, there is a question paper button. I look at all the questions and I identify the sets which look familiar or solvable. Now, this identification is based on a very strong intuition built on practice. Because I have solved thousands and thousands and thousands of DILR sets, I know, okay, this setup looks familiar, let me go ahead and solve it. This setup doesn't look familiar, let me go ahead and avoid it. So familiar or solvable is dependent on me having practiced a lot of questions. Then whatever questions I've identified, I begin solving those questions. The first set that I've taken. 5 minutes into the set, I reassess. After having spent some 4 or 5 minutes, I reassess, am I close to reaching the answers or are the answers very, very far away from me? If I know I can solve the remainder of the question in the next 7 to 8 minutes, okay, I'll solve it further. If it is solvable within the next 7 to 8 minutes, I will continue solving it. If I feel it is not solvable within the next 7 to 8 minutes, I will move on to the next. I will not, here people end up committing the error of internal negotiation. I've invested 5 minutes in this. If I invest maybe 3 more minutes, then I'll be able to see what this question is about. If you're going to solve something, it will come to you instantly. If you're not going to solve something, it will remain a challenge. Move on. Don't waste time on something. Okay. After all the familiar sets are over, move over to the next likely set. Even within the unfamiliar sets, you would have a ranking of what works, what doesn't work. Keep track of time. Whatever you're solving, keep track of time. If less than 5 minutes are left, stop solving. And this is again personally to me. You could keep less than 5 minutes or less than 2 minutes, depending on what you like. I go to less than 5 minutes are left. Then I go through the entire paper again and look for all the questions that are teed up. Given that they are no risk questions, I make sure I attempt all the theta questions to the extent possible with relevant numbers. If I know that there are six apples that a person can have at max, I read through the question slightly. Then I look at the theta question, and then they ask me the question: what is the maximum number of apples this person can have? I'll happily mark 4 or 5 and move on. If it turns out correctly, great. If it doesn't turn out correctly, still great. It was not something I wasted time on. And then for the last 30 seconds, I stop attempting the theta questions. I stop doing anything else. I simply sit down, take deep breaths, and prepare for the QA section. Why I prepare for the QA section is because the decision making in the DILR section is for 8 sets. Whether I'm attempting this set or that set or that set, that happens. But when I'm attempting the QA section, I'm making that decision for 34 individual questions. So I have to be very, very cognizant of the fact that my decision making has to be top notch when I'm going through those 34 questions. Now this can lead to some questions. These can lead to some questions. So 2 preemptive questions that I have thought of that you might have. So I'll try to address them. How do you identify which sets look solvable? Not necessarily familiar, but solvable. I'm going familiar, solvable is the same thing. And this judgment has to happen in 2 to 3 minutes. 2 minutes to 3 minutes. This judgment has to happen in 2 to 3 minutes. Now again, you may choose to increase it to 5 minutes, up to you. Then you would reduce your time here, whatever. So 2 to 3 minutes, I look at a question. If the setup is familiar, great. If the setup is familiar, great. I then look at the volume of data present. If the volume of data is reasonable, within my remit, I think I can manage. Then I will mark it as a familiar question, solvable question. I'll attempt it. If the data seems too large, then I would not mark it. I would leave it for later. I would attempt it later. I hope that preemptively solves one of your questions. The other thing is, how many sets should you attempt, or is there a preferred order of questions that you should go for? Again, there are exams in which at this time in my life I am able to solve 3 sets and I'm happy, and there are mocks in which I'm able to solve 7 sets and I feel that I did not perform to the best of my ability because the 8th question was also within my range. So there is no precise number of questions that I'm looking to attempt. Whatever the target has to be to reach my best number of questions instead of reaching any predetermined number of questions or sets. Of course, the added instruction is also, just because you have invested time on a set, say out of 4 questions in a set, question 1, question 2, question 3 and question 4, you are able to solve question 1, question 2 and question 4, but you are unable to solve question 3, move on. You don't have to attempt every question in the set just because you've invested time. Also, just ensure that when you're reading through your DILR questions or whatever, don't try to fit a framework or a setup that you previously thought on the question that you're doing. Don't try to force a framework, because it looks like that question that I had previously solved, in that they use this framework, so I will use this framework here itself. The framework should come naturally. If you're having to force a framework, then most likely you're attempting it incorrectly. But again, because DILR is such a unique section, all of these insights, all of these talking points that I have, they would turn from every question, from every set, from every mock. So this is the general guideline to follow, at least the one that I follow. You can come up with your own, or you can try this, see if it works out for you. The next thing is, what is meant by analysis? Analysis is a bird's eye view of what went well, what went wrong, how to identify what areas to focus on in the upcoming weeks. Without analysis, taking mocks and appearing for tests has no meaning. Okay. Uh, some people appear for mocks a lot, don't engage in analysis, and that is the worst thing you can do, because you've taken away the time that you would have used for study. You appeared for a test, you've not done the analysis, you've not learned what are the errors that you commit, and the added bonus is you will now be demotivated because most likely your score would not be that great. So, in order to avoid those emotional imbalances, see, you have to be a little monk-like. You have to be a little monk-like. You have to be a little emotionless. If you can solve, great. If you can't solve, learn. You have to keep on learning. Without learning, appearing for a test without analysis, appearing for a test is useless. A good analysis takes different amounts of time for different people because of where their current proficiency levels may lie. Say for instance, if I was able to solve 7 sets in the exam, and somebody else was able to solve 3 sets in the exam, my analysis would take comparatively lesser amount of time because there was just one question that I was unable to figure out. His analysis would take a longer amount of time because he was unable to figure out 5 questions. Of course, it would also depend on what is the accuracy level that we have. Say in the 3 sets that he attempted, and he ended up getting all 3 correct. And of the 7 sets I attempted, I got some 10 questions correct, which is less than 3 sets correct. Then I would spend more time. So it would depend on your proficiency levels, your accuracy levels, your attempt levels. All of that is factored in. It will be very unique to you. There is no set number of hours that one has to dedicate to analysis of the DLR section. Emotion and analysis do not mix well. When analyzing a mock, you have to leave behind all preconceived idea of what easy topics are, what tough topics are. See, at the time of selecting the set, at the time of selecting which is familiar, which is solvable, I'm going to go by, okay, this seems easy, looks familiar, I will attempt it. At the time of analysis, that is no longer true. At the time of analysis, regardless of what topic the question is now, solve the question, and solve it for an extended period of time. An analysis delayed is an analysis missed. See, you have to make sure you do your analysis as quickly as possible. If you delay your analysis, the likelihood of you being able to remember what all thoughts went through your head at the time of attempting would dwindle tremendously, and thereby reducing the potential learning that you could have had. So make sure your analysis happens as quickly as possible. If you're attempting it in a window setup, as there is a window within which you have to attempt, and then somebody else will look at it and finally come up with their insight of what is required, what is not required. Okay, but for the test that you can access the results or the answers of very quickly, do it as quickly as possible. So there are 4 key points with regards to analysis. Analysis is historical, based on what you've done, is very unique, based on an individual's proficiency level, bias free, does not matter if you like the topic or not, and finally non-skippable. If you're skipping an analysis, it was useless for you to take the test. Don't waste your time, don't waste anyone else's time. Chill. Watch a movie, go for a trip, then the situation improves, but don't attempt a test if you're not going to do the analysis. Next thing is how to do the DILR section analysis. Remember, there was a bit of uncertainty, the unknown involved in the DILR section, and therefore the analysis here is not as clear cut as how it would be for the quant section. But still, what I used to do as a candidate, what I advise my current students to do, I will share that with you. The first step, whatever sets, you would have 8 sets. So set 1, set 2. See, don't give question ratings to individual questions. Give ratings to the entire the entire set, whether it was easy or medium or difficult. Give that rating for the entire set. Then whether you attempted it or not, whether the setup was familiar or not, If the setup was familiar, yes, and then also write down what that setup was. Say it was a set theory. It was a maxima minima set theory, unconstrained maxima minima, constrained maxima minima, It was set theory with uh, four, four, four set Venn diagram question, whatever it was. Write it down to the level of granularity that you can, as pointed as you can. It would help you in future. Next thing, write down the outcomes of every individual question. Correct, incorrect, incorrect, correct, whatever it is. You did not attempt this question. There were too many parameters. This is an arrangement question, but too many parameters. There were 7 things that you had to distribute between people. So you left it, and then you did not attempt it. Therefore, there was no result. Prepare a table like this. Of course, everyone will have a separate list of what's difficult and what's easy. Say set theory for, I like set theory a lot. I like set theory extremely, and whenever there is a set theory question, I tend to attempt it and I tend to get it correct as well, and thereby I feel set theory is easy. On the other hand, you might not like set theory. You might not be getting the accuracy levels in set theory. That those setups may not be familiar with you. Okay, so for you, that might be difficult. That might be medium. Whatever it was, everyone will have a separate list of what's difficult and what's easy. Do not rate the difficulty of a set based on what the official analysis says, because that is their best estimate of what it should have been for an average candidate. You are not average, you are a unique individual. Your level of interpretation will vary. You will have a separate list altogether. Try to do this as soon as possible. If you can, right after the test. If you cannot write after the test, at least as soon as the solutions are available. Next thing, reattempt all incorrect and missed questions. And when I say incorrect and missed questions, I mean sets. Now you might have a set in which you have attempted 4 questions, you've got 3 right and 1 is incorrect. Reattempt the entire set. Reattempt the entire set. Do this entire thing. Invest at least 60 minutes before peeking at the solution. Why I'm talking of peeking, I'll let you know. Why I'm talking of 60 minutes, at least 60 minutes. I'll also let you know. Whenever you're trying to learn something, until the time you do it yourself, until the time you experience it yourself, you will never be good at it, you will never learn from it. So, first you should struggle with the question. If you feel there are too many cases, find out too many cases. If you feel there is a lot of calculation involved, there are, in a tabular form, there were lots of calculations given there, do all those calculations. Take the longest route possible to the answer, so that when you eventually see the solution, so that when you eventually see the right way of doing it or the official way of doing it, then you are able to appreciate, oh, I could have reduced my time here, I could have interpreted it this way. All those things would happen. Of course, I'm not assuming just because you've invested 60 minutes, you'll be able to solve it only. You might just not be able to solve it at the end of 60 minutes either. Then what you should do is peek at the solution, the initial portion of the question, initial portion of the set, initial portion of the solution to the set. Yes. Look at that, how they have recorded, or look at the, say, initial portion of the solution, or look at how they have recorded the data, the table that they have created, simply the heading of that table. Make that table and then go ahead and try to solve it again. Try to solve it yourself. The things that stay with you, the things that you are able to learn most from, are the things that you have done yourself. You looking at a solution will enable you to appreciate it, never assimilate it. For you to learn that topic, you have to solve it yourself. You might, if you've gone through the other analysis videos as well, you would have seen my analysis methodologies take a lot of time, and they do, and I'm not apologetic about it. If you're looking to improve something in a limited amount of time, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time. Expecting to become champion at something overnight is a fool's task. Don't do that. Please don't do that. It will take you a lot of effort. In fact, most people who end up performing well are the ones who do the analysis well and do the analysis in a detailed manner. There is no way around it. As much as we want to be instantly gratified by reaching our conclusions or final goals quickly, it doesn't work out that way in the real world. You have to put in the effort yourself. This is another thing. You have to put in the effort. Nobody else can put in the effort for you. You might join groups, you might join Facebook groups or Telegram groups or WhatsApp groups, and people might help you solve questions there. Understand, somebody else solving the question for you is actually detrimental to your growth. You solving a question is wonderful, somebody else solving it for you is a detrimental outcome, but that's a discussion for another day. Solve as much as you can, as much as you can, and post this even after 30 minutes of investment. If you can't solve, great. Okay, understand, just because I'm saying you have to invest at least 60 minutes, it does not mean if you are able to solve that question after the test in under 10 minutes, move on until the time you are able to solve it. The upper limit of that is 60 minutes. 60 minutes is not the lower limit. 30 minutes is not the lower limit, it is the upper limit. If you are not unable to solve at the end of 60 minutes, then peak. If you are able to solve it within 10 minutes or 12 minutes, then move on. So this roughly will take you around 4 to 5 hours for the DILR section. This roughly will take you around 4 to 5 hours for an average candidate. For different candidates, it would be different. The last thing in the analysis for the DILR section, if there is a new recording style that you have seen there, new recording style, the new way to capture data, list down all new recording styles. This is key. See, in DILR, more often than not, at least my personal learning has been, it is not about understanding the question, it is about how do you record the data that you are able to capture most relevant pieces of information. And that comes from recording styles. So more the number of recording styles that you have control over, have encountered, the greater the likelihood of you not being stumped by a question in which a new recording style is given. The next thing you should do is, after you have seen the solution, try to reduce the steps compared to the official solution. The official solution, traditionally, especially in the DILR section, tends to be a very foolish solution. Foolish in the sense inefficient. They try to break it down or solve it in the slowest manner possible because they are catering to the lowest denominator. They are catering to they're trying to explain it to everyone because they don't have the opportunity of interacting with the candidate. They try to resolve all the doubts in one go itself. On the other hand, your target is not to solve it the way it is given in the video. Your target is not to solve it the way it was written. Your target is to solve it in an efficient manner. So how can you reduce the steps? Maybe the calculations that they have engaged in, you can cut down on effort there. Maybe the number of cases that they have identified, you could cut down on some of the cases based on some condition you identified previously. So try and incorporate the work that you have done and the official solution given to come up with a more efficient solution. 99 times out of 100, there will be a case where you can come up with a more efficient solution. If there is an insight that you derived, record it in a separate place. This would serve as a repository for all insights. Say a beautiful insight that I learned some years back about a DLR question. This is a very familiar setup of, there are 5 people, they have made predictions about 5 sportsmen who have won a tournament in the last 5 years, and 1:1 relationship. They have made predictions about 5 sportsmen winning a specific tournament in the last 5 years, and all of them have made different number of correct predictions. 5 people, each has made 5 predictions, and all of them have made different number of correct predictions. Now the insight I derived here, which is very simple. Someone can have 5 correct predictions, but they cannot have 4 correct predictions. They can have 3, they can have 2, they can have 1, and they can have 0. Nobody can have 4 correct predictions, because if 4 predictions were correct, incidentally your 5th prediction will also be correct. So this case will not happen, and right off the top, in such a setup, this insight has been derived. For future questions where predictions have been mentioned, you can straight away claim, if there are n number of people, n minus 1 predictions, nobody will get correct, and all other prediction numbers are possible, including 0, and you would start making cases from here. This is an insight that helps you reduce the work in future questions. If you come across any such insight in any question, please make sure you record that for future reference. Another thing, and this is with regards to some sets or some mocks that happen. Yes, the DILR section comparatively is tougher in CAT, but it is nowhere comparable to the DILR section of the mocks that are floating in the market. And I don't mind them being tough. It is a comparative exam, give a tough paper, that's okay. But the problem is candidates end up fretting over one set or one question or one particular thing they keep on getting obsessed with. That is not advisable at all. If there is one set that escapes you, even after looking at the solution, spending time on it, talking it out with your friends, asking your teacher, everything has been done, and you're still unable to figure out how did they reach this decision, or how did they get the trigger for recording it. This move on. That's okay. You're not knowing one particular set. See, I'm giving you a discount here, but this discount should not happen 3 or 4 times in one mock itself. Say out of every 50 questions you see, there will be 2 that you can skip over. They are useless questions. But if you're skipping over 3 questions in every mock, it means you are being lazy. You have to learn. You have to learn how to solve questions. Historically, CAT papers have 3 to 4 easy sets. So you getting stuck on one question, getting obsessed over one question, not a good strategy. Emotional imbalance would be very, very close there. Of course, the next step has to be practice from varied sources. Unlike quant, there is no directed practice here. Try first cover all the basics from all the topics and then try to solve a mishmash of questions, because that is how the questions in the exams will come. An excellent source for practice are past year mocks. You could also attempt past year papers, but only attempt past year papers up until 2017. Prior to that, those questions are good for practice, but not really relevant now, because they are more in the line of uni-topic questions. They have one skill being tested in one question, so not really, not really as relevant as the past themes. And finally, the line that I've been stating right from the beginning of this video: embrace the uncertainty. You will not be able to solve all 8 questions. You will not be able to solve even 7 questions. You might not be able to solve 5 questions. You might not be able to solve 3 questions. But not being able to solve versus getting overwhelmed by it and not even solving 2 sets that were within your range, that is unacceptable. See, you should not be targeting 100 percentile. You should be targeting 100 percentile or a 99 percentile or a 95 percentile or a 90 percentile. You should be targeting your maximum. If your maximum is 90, that is fine. If your maximum is 95, that is fine. If your maximum is 99, that is fine. If your maximum is 100, that is fine. Anything less than your maximum is unacceptable. And in reaching that maximum, there may be questions that you don't know. There may be questions in the mock that you attempt that you don't know. It is okay. You don't have to get flustered by it. If you get flustered, the only person missing out or having an adverse impact of that is you. What is the point of getting flustered? Think of it like a very simple thing that we were taught when you were little. Never abuse anyone, because I don't know if it works in English, but in Hindi we used to say अगर किसी ने तुम्हें गाली दी तो मत लो. If somebody is hurling abuses at you, don't take them. Then those abuses will stay with them. Similarly, if a question is making you nervous, if a question is making you flustered, move on. That is it. And additionally, do you also understand the fact that you are flustered, or the fact that you are underconfident, or the fact that you are nervous at the time of solving questions is an indication that you haven't done adequate practice previously. If you had done adequate practice previously, you would know, okay, if I can't solve this question, I'll move on to the other question. If I can't solve this question, I'll move on to the other question. But if you know that there are very few things that you know, and then you can't solve the first question, you can't solve the second question, you can't solve the third question, and then you'll be like, oh my god, what do I do now? I remember in CAT 2018, CAT 2018? Yes, CAT 2018, the exam in which I had gotten my highest ever DILR percentile. I remember I solved the first set, I solved the second set, I could not solve the third set, I could not solve the fourth set, I could not solve the fifth set, and then I solved the sixth set, the seventh set, and the eighth set. So I was able to solve 3 consecutive sets after skipping 3 consecutive sets, and it was okay. I ended up scoring decently well. So again, this comparison is slightly unfair because I had nothing riding on that exam. But you would have to develop that Zen-like feature wherein you skipping over a question does not give you anxiety. Because if it does, the only person it harms is you. Okay, let's get to the future task checklist. Please make sure you attempt your mock in one sitting. Clean recording while solving questions, in DILR especially. More often than not, it is recording style that holds you back. If you record it appropriately, wonderful. If you don't record it appropriately, everything goes haywire. Self-analysis as soon as possible after the mock. Prepare a repository of good questions and ignore weird questions. Of course, there are certain questions that are exceedingly stupid. Leave them. You don't have to learn about them. Say if you have a question, and this is, I wouldn't name an institute, but some institute had a question in one of the box, not this year, but last year, sometime that they had a circular arrangement question in which there were 16 cases possible, and then there was a question based on how many of the cases will something happen, in which you had to actually make those 16 cases to reach the answer, and it was very easy for them to simply type, so these are the 16 cases and in these cases this is why. It is impossible for a candidate to make 16 cases in the exam. Ignore such questions. If it is nonsensical, if it is something that cannot be done in limited amount of time, leave that question useless. Do not move on to the next mock until the analysis of the last one is done. This is non-negotiable. If you're not doing the analysis, attempting the next mock is of no purpose. Also, do not expect just because you've done analysis, your score in the next mock will go. That is of no concern. Next thing, make small but slightly difficult targets. Say, if you're dedicated to solving 2 DILR sets every day, fine. Once that has become a part of your routine, push yourself up and go to 3, go to 4, go to whatever number of DILR sets that you can attempt. If you can't have daily targets, you have weekly targets, fine. Have weekly targets, but whatever targets you set, they should be slightly difficult to achieve. And they should be definitely achieved by, see, when you think in the long run, if you want to become an Indian national cricket team player, it is a very, very unrealistic goal. But if you think tomorrow at 6 a.m. in the morning, I will get up and go to the field to run. Once you complete that task, there is a sense of completion, there is a sense of achievement that you will have, which will spur you on for making the next few steps. Yes, there is a long-term large goal, but the tactics, the short-term actions that you have to take, they have to be the primary focus. In the long run, we are all dead. Some economist said that. I think Keynes. But in the long run, we are all dead. Don't worry about the long run. Think about the short run only. These days, a beautiful thing that I've observed in candidates is everyone is worried, everyone is tensed. They're not studying, but they have a lot of anxiety, which is, again, maybe I am emotionless and therefore it doesn't make a difference to me. My only concern is if you're working, you wouldn't have time for anxiety. People who are actually working don't have time for anxiety. And when I say working, I don't mean sitting with the book for 8 hours. If you made your target, every day I will solve 3 DLR sets, you solve 3 DLR sets. After that, you can enjoy your day. You can meet friends, you can meet friends online, you can have your favorite food, you can play video games, you can read novels, comics, whatever is your favorite activity. But do those things that you have set as your target. Until you do them, don't reward yourself. See, this is the next point itself. Reward yourself when your targets are met and withhold rewards when targets are not met. What I mean by withhold rewards, say if your family is having dessert, you will not eat dessert because you did not complete the analysis today of the DILR section. If you like playing video games with your brother, you and your brother play FIFA, you will not play FIFA that day because you have not completed your. The pain has to come first and then the reward comes. Sadly, too many of us schedule reward first and pain later, and the reward becomes so engaging that you never get around to doing the painful activity, which is outright pain. This is especially true for people on Pagal Guy. Do not compare yourself to others, only to your past self. And what I mean by past self is the kind of errors that you made previously. Are you making the same type of errors? If you are, then there is no improvement. You need to work harder. If you're making new kinds of errors, then you are improving. That is wonderful. Say if in one DLR sectional test, in one DLR mock you've got 42, and in the second DLR mock you've got 30. 42 to 30. The errors that you made here and the errors that you made here, you have got new errors. Oh, you have done a wonderful job. You have become a better DILR person. It doesn't matter if your score has gone up. Absolute score matters nothing. What matters is, are you reducing the kinds of errors, the number of errors you're making? Not the absolute number, the numerical value, the kinds of errors that you're making. Say mathematical errors or recording errors or the misinterpreting a statement errors. If your list of errors goes down, you can expect to do very well in the exams. And this is also a reason why teachers tend to do well in exams in CAT or whatever. At least the diligent teachers tend to do well because they keep on learning, they keep on identifying the flaws or errors in their head, and then eventually reach a point where they tend to make lesser amount of errors. Last thing with regards to DILR, treat it like a puzzle. That I'm sure when you were little, you had some friends in school, and then everybody got a written on a puzzle, and then they were okay. How would you do this? How would you do that? And it was a fun activity. You enjoyed doing it. You learned it. You came back home. You repeated it in front of your parents, your siblings, whoever lived in your colony. You enjoyed the process now. Right now, because you are putting such great emphasis on it, you're not even enjoying the process. You're stressing yourself out. You're not reaching a valid outcome, and you're becoming more and more tense, which doesn't help you in any way. If you solve it, wonderful. If you haven't solved it, you learned something from for the future. Treat it that way. Both the outcomes are great. One boosts your ego, second enhances your prospects. This is the best thing that can happen to you. Problem is, people have such negative outlook towards life. They would turn it around and say, either I can't solve it, or if I can solve it, it was so easy, anyone can solve it. If you keep your mindset negative, of course, nobody can help you. Enjoy the ride. This is a wonderful, wonderful experience. The CAT prep days. I don't know if you read the all I wanted to speak about CAT page on Pagal Guy for different seasons. Go through that page, you will read the experiences. All the toppers, all the people who made it to respectable B schools, they would all talk of the trials and tribulations of this phase. And they would also mention how they are missing it now. Because this is an amazingly good time. You are unsure, you are nervous, but there lies a promise of tomorrow. The promise of tomorrow, if you succeeding, you doing well in CAT, you making it to a B school. That promise is everything. That is the essence of life, the promise of a better tomorrow. Unless you think in positive terms, unless you think in what all can I achieve instead of, oh my god, how bad can it turn out? The likelihood of there is a visualization technique that sports champions use. I invite you to Google. Visualization is awesome. But remember, too often people misinterpret visualization as a standalone activity. Visualization along with effort. Put in the effort and then visualize. Your dreams will come true. If you simply dream and visualize, it will never happen. That will be all for the DILR analysis, input or output of advice. As I told you earlier, if you have any other questions with regards to DILR analysis, feel free to ask it in the comment section below. Anastasis Shankar signing off.